This happened to be back in winter of 2012. At the time, I lived in Florida, right outside of Live Oak, right around Highway 90. In fact, I was out behind my house, hanging out with my dogs. It was the evening time, just as it was starting to get dark. For the record, my backyard has tons and tons of grass in it, and a little bit of woods all throughout. I have about 10 to 12 acres, so there is a decent amount of woods that goes on. My dogs were walking around and started acting weird. I was asking them, what's wrong? Seeing if they smelt something or acted different. They kept looking into the woods. Also, I thought I heard what I can only describe as movement, so I thought maybe it was a deer, since, well, there are plenty of deer up here. But they started acting dodgy, which kind of put me off. Right at that very moment, my face, my nose, my entire being began to be slapped with this awful odor. It was like a mix of skunk, wet dog, blood, death, dumpster. I can't even begin to describe it accurately. It was terrible. And just as I smelt that horrible odor, more movement began to occur in the woods around me. Both my dogs began to act really weird at this point, starting to low growl and watch closely as some animal moving in the woods started to make its way towards the opening, right where we were. Then, before I know it, even in the dusk, out stepped this shaggy animal that stood on two legs before us. It wasn't much taller than me. In fact, if I had to guess height, I would probably say somewhere between 5 and 6 feet, since I stand about 6'2". I'm not a huge dude by any means, but I'm definitely taller than most men. I was pretty utterly shocked by what I was looking at. It just sat there and stared at me and my dogs for a second, before turning right around and walking back the way it came. This thing looked like a dog that stood on two legs, covered in long, shaggy black hair. I couldn't really see the face very well, but it looked just like that of a dog. Like, I want to say a German Shepherd, but it looked different. Like the face didn't have much hair on it, if that makes sense, and the snout was a little more slender, and there was hair all around its face. It's really hard to describe. I guess the best way would be to possibly describe it like a monkey, in the same way that their faces have virtually no hair, but they have hair all around their faces. That's kind of what this thing looked like. It didn't act aggressive, growl, or make any hostile movements. It kind of came out of the woods, glared at my dogs and I, and kind of seemed stunned that we were there, as if it wasn't expecting us. It looked like it kind of had a deer in the headlights look, where it wasn't really sure what to do next, before just turning around and retreating back in the woods the way it came. I was shocked more than anything. I have never seen or heard of an animal that looked like this before. So me and my dogs went back in the house. My dogs the entire time, however, were on edge, and when this thing stepped out of the woods, my dogs still acted pretty hostile, the hair on their backs rising up, refusing to come with me. I know dogs generally chase animals and will growl at animals, but this was different. Whatever this animal was, and again, I don't know what it was, my dogs definitely did not like it. So after we went back inside, nothing really happened the rest of the day or night, and there was no sounds, no noises, nothing out of the normal. It's pretty common and I for my dogs to have our little evening time, walking around, checking out the sunset, and just enjoying the nature. I mean, I love it, but I mainly do it for my dogs, and out of all the time that I've been out here, I've never had anything weird like that happen before, nor have I ever seen anything out of the ordinary in my entire life, and I'm 36 years old, and I've been around quite a bit, out in the woods, out in the mountains. The only thing I can really think of is that people here in Florida talk about seeing the skunk ape, which this thing didn't look anything like an ape at all. It looked more like a dog that stood on two legs, which I already told you about. So unless you can tell me what it is I saw, I'm not too sure. I know there are some animals that live in the swamps, like cougars and bears, but this didn't resemble any of them. Its frame and stature and build was completely different than any of those animals. One of the most terrifying things that I've ever seen in my life happened just last spring. It was April 16th, and I was on my way to go see my brother for his birthday, who happens to live north of Lexington. I was right around Port Sanilac in Michigan, probably about a couple miles south at the time, and driving northbound on M25. At the time, I believe I was the only witness because there were no other cars on the road. But this road is not a dead back roads by any means. It is a pretty frequently driven on road in this area. For those that don't know anything about the geography of Michigan or the M25 road, it's littered and sprinkled with houses and neighborhoods all throughout, but mainly lots of heavy forest all throughout, with large pastures in between here and there. You would just have to see it for yourself. I mean, you could always drop on Google Maps and check it out on Street View if you're really that curious. In fact, I'll go ahead and recommend you do that, since it will give you a better idea of what to look for. All of a sudden I'm driving and running out of the woods from my right, crossing the road and going into the woods to my left, was what I can only describe to you as a werewolf. Now, because I've seen my fair share of horror movies in my day, I feel pretty adamant that I can give you a decent description. The thing that comes to mind the most, have you ever seen the movie Dog Soldiers? If you've never heard of it before, it's a werewolf movie that came out in 2002, and it deals with werewolves in Europe. I can't exactly remember the plot, but whatever this thing that jumped across the road looked very, very identical to the creatures in that movie. Very hairless, almost a human-like body, no hocks in the back legs, not super ripped like a bodybuilder, lean, but not overly ripped. The entire neck and head, however, covered in a thick mane like a lion, with the face of a very large wolf. No real humanoid features at all. I mean, maybe the body, but the face is very wolf. Very fierce and demonic looking, with large hands, just like a person's, with large claws. No tail, and again, most people describe dogmen around here, or so I've heard, that they look just like an upright dog, hocks, tail and all. But again, this had really no fur on its lower body, and if it did, it was very minimal. The legs, again, were just like a man. I couldn't really see the feet, which is why I thought at first it was a man running in a werewolf costume, because it looked so natural in the way it ran, like it didn't have to force itself to try and run unnaturally. I hope I'm making sense to you. Then again, seeing what I saw really doesn't make sense. But then again, this is 2020, where stuff is out of control, so I guess we have to expect the unexpected. It ran in such incredible speeds that it freaked me out. I slammed on my brakes, and it's a good thing that nobody was behind me, as in just 2-3 strides, this thing had not only jumped out of the woods out onto the road, but had cleared the entire highway and off into the other portion of woods, all in just a matter of seconds. Whatever this was incredibly powerful and fast. Like I said, it scared me, especially after seeing it, and I got a pretty good look at it, even though it only peered out in the open for a few seconds. It was enough to see almost every detail that I needed to. To clarify, this happened right around 2:30 in the afternoon. It was sunny, no really clouds in the sky at all, so I had a perfect viewing of it right in front of me. To give some estimate to you about how far it was in front of my car, I would say no more than 50 feet at the very most, but no closer than 20 or 30 feet. Again, I'm just using rough estimates. Had I been going probably 10 miles an hour faster, I might have collided with it. But then again, who really knows? After the sighting, I called up my brother, freaked out on him, and told him, "Dude, you have werewolves around here." To which he just laughed at me. But once I got to his house, and after a while, explained to him what it is that I exactly saw, he started to tell me of some other stories that he had, as well as his friends. Now, it wasn't till a little later that I learned that these things were called dogmen, and that I guess they're pretty well known up in this Michigan-Wisconsin area. At the time, I didn't really know that. Even though he didn't have any personal sightings of his own, He's had many friends and coworkers who have seen the same description of a creature I have while driving to work or just being out in the area, especially here in northern Michigan. I guess up here, north of Lexington, there's a hotbed of them, and they're supposedly all over the area. I guess, in hindsight, none of this should really surprise me, as there are stretches of woodland all over, with a lake, and tons of rural farmland all along the west side along this road. Who knows what could really be living out there? I mean, after all, the forest and the area give plenty of space for something to stay hidden if it really wants to.